Welcome to Plant Your Seed. I'm your host, Fred Ferris. On each episode, we share stories of how ordinary people have transformed their lives. Each story is compassionate, each story is authentic, and each story is a transformation. Here are the stories of the people who are changing our world by transitioning to a plant-based diet. Today on Plant Your Seed, joining us from Texas, we have Chris Fuller-Wigg. Chris is the co-founder and executive director of Austin Farm Sanctuary. He is also the vice president of services at Motiv, a SaaS or software as a service implementation company. Over the last 5 years, Chris has worked to build Austin Farm Sanctuary from their half-acre micro-sanctuary into the blossoming nonprofit it is today. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, thanks for having me on, and appreciate the intro.
Thanks for being here on Plant Your Seed. Let's start from the beginning. How did you start Austin Farm Sanctuary?
Austin Farm Sanctuary started as a little bit of a happenstance, more organically, I guess you could say. In 2016, my wife Angela and I bought our first home in South Austin, and thought that our half-acre backyard would be a wonderful space to rescue a couple of dogs and start a family. But the weekend that we closed, we found out about 2 goats that were in need. Bertha and Cookie were being raised at a local goat dairy and were no longer of use, in quotes, of use. Mm-hmm. And so knowing that typically means they get sent to slaughter, we were able to work out the people that we knew through the grapevine to have them join our little half-acre blossoming family. And that led into other rescues, but namely Doya, the first pig that we rescued a couple of months later. We found out about him from our neighbor, who basically had said, hey, there's this girl in FFA that needs a place for her pig to go. He's going to be slaughtered tomorrow if not finding a home. And you have goats. Y'all seem to be into weird animals. Can you help us? And we were conveniently those weird people that would figure out what we could do to accommodate this 7-month-old, 200-pound pig into our lives. And, we went and got our first trailer and brought Doya there the next day and figured out how to start a little sanctuary. And Doya taught us so much, not just in how to care for farm animals, that almost minimally, but at that time we were vegetarian. I had been on that quote unquote journey for a while, like transitioning kind of into veganism. And just by meeting Doya, that helped us to connect all of the dots of like a deeper awareness than we thought that we could have about farm animals. We actively were choosing not to hurt them for years, mm-hmm. but this gave us a way and like an insight to like find out how could we actively, help by, and that really was through meeting Doya and realizing like the story that he was able to live and the experiences that our friends and family, as they would come over and visit him and get to know Doya a little bit, were having. That inspired Austin Farm Sanctuary to be able to start platforming their voices and also becoming a force of rescuing in Central Texas.
Now, for the people that don't know, can you clarify what FFA is?
Yeah, for sure. So FFA is Future Farmers of America, also referred to as 4-H or ag in different parts of the country. And essentially what it is, it's a high school class elective that you can take where you are given a baby animal and you raise them to quote unquote slaughter age. For most animals, that is 8 or 9 months old. So essentially these kids are given a month-old, maybe a month-old animal, naming them, raising them, and showing them at shows. And then they're purchased by the organization at the end. They're slaughtered for their flesh, and the kids get to go home with a blue ribbon and a check. Mm. So you can imagine we get contacted a lot by high school students when this project is coming to an end, and they're where their hearts were 8 months prior before they just cared for a baby animal that they realize is incredibly smart, sentient, and loves them. They try to find alternatives. And we have a number of FFA rescues because of that exact situation.
Whose idea was the sanctuary?
That's a good question. I mean, it was definitely Angela and our combined idea to take in Doya and start, rescuing some farmed animals. Mm-hmm. I think becoming the idea of the sanctuary differing. The half-acre sanctuary was a joined kind of vision by myself and Angela to be able to save animals. And then since then, as we've kind of moved things forward and the possibility had opened up to be, this 40-acre space or kind of being much larger than that, a lot of those ideas have been spearheaded for me for that, desire to make it kind of bigger to, accommodate more people, where previously it was Angela and my peaceful half-acre spot where we're able to save animals and give them love and share that with people.
Mm-hmm.
We've evolved into something that still is very much about love, but it's not a whole lot of privacy. So that kind of growing dream has been more my side, I guess.
What was it about Doya that changed you?
The thing about Doya was, before then I had loved pigs, but never really knew a pig. I loved them because I knew they were sentient animals that in the pictures or in videos that were not horrifying, I were cute and I could I saw them and that was enough.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get to lay down with, Doya is now almost 800 pounds and you're able to synchronize your breath with them and they come or they lay their leg on you or you just get to feel them. Maybe they're more standoffish. Doya is incredibly socialized, but I don't mean to, a pig that would be standoffish could still be loved and give you this experience. But laying in the backyard and looking at Doya in the eyes and seeing his sentience, but also the similarities of his eyelashes and the way his earlobes work and his eyes. And all of that was just so much more of a connection. I knew I loved animals, but I had never got to have the experience that I would have laying with our husky Finn on the couch and feeling so in simpatico and together.
Mm-hmm.
But I got to feel that with Doya, and that was something that just truly clicked, where I saw farmed animals more than I ever had before, just in knowing that experiencing and getting to just know somebody so deeply. Knowing Doya as an individual opened up my mind and my perspective of what farm animals could be, as far as their level of awareness and sentience and desire to share this space with us became so much more apparent once I knew him. And I had really never heard of FFA, or it was the first time I knew, other than an agriculture setting, the plight of farm animals just everywhere in our world. And so that
Right.
level of vulnerability for a very happy 8-month-old, 200-pound baby just also then opened my horizon so much more to see where the opportunity to save was.
When you think back to that day that you saved Doya, what stands out?
It's a great question. I mean, I guess a couple of different things. The first thing was I really respect the girl that raised him in FFA and surrendered him to us, not because I agree with the decision to take that project on anyway, because we strongly discourage people from joining FFA.
Mm-hmm.
There's other ways you can show love to animals and be a part of their life than this experience. So if those listening that want to have high school students to interact with farm animals and learn relationships, sanctuaries are when you want to be, not at FFA. But in that day, that was still a really courageous thing for her to choose at the end of the project to not go forward with this, because it's not the standard in FFA. There's definitely some ways to that it's not cool. You're not kind of following along. So That's one thing that stands out, is that her being bold to take a stance that's not necessarily quote unquote popular because a life was at stake. I think that's, a decision that every person around the world makes on a daily basis. And I thought it was really cool of her to make sure that she made the right decision, not just the easy quote unquote decision. Yeah. And I guess the other thing when I think back to that day is remembering how, I don't know if fearful is the right word. I think intimidated we were by Doya, because at that point you can imagine most people in the world, and I at that point had met, a 200-pound animal without a fence between us.
Uh-huh.
So just loading him onto the trailer, and I grew up in a cul-de-sac in the suburbs of Houston. This isn't farm animals hadn't been my experience, other than I'm a guy that grew up in Texas.
Right.
So going and loading Doya up and then unloading him, and just thinking about how I innocent or naive, both are the words that come to my head. Me and Angela were then, to try to figure out how to navigate this 200-pound beast that we thought at the time, that now anybody that shows up that's less than 400 pounds, oh, they're so small, they have so much growing to do. So it's that part's funny to think about how we have transitioned and how our perspective has changed so much just because of the experiences we've had. And I don't know, that, there's a 1,200-pound steer with big old horns running around, and Doya, even his little 800-pound self, seems so much more, I don't know, they never seem scary, but I don't even know what the word is. They just seem innocent. Like, like, oh, you're not scary, Doya, you're just big, but you're incredibly kind and polite. And I don't know, thinking back, the contrast between now and then, I guess, was a fun thing to kind of look back on.
The other thing I was wondering was, when you think back to that day, how does that feel, knowing that you saved this pig from FFA and you had to go through and buy a trailer and do all these things in order to bring this pig to your little half acre, and now it has changed your life tremendously? You're going to 40 acres.
I mean, I'll say my first reaction is grateful that you asked the question, because it's not in my nature to kind of pause and reflect and just kind of appreciate it. But I hadn't really, and I hadn't until kind of this moment thought back on that trajectory, or kind of, reflected on it.
I'll keep going back to Doya, because Doya changed so much in your life.
Yeah.
Doya changed everything. He created the sanctuary that it is today.
Yeah, I call him, and sometimes on social media posts you'll see him be called the pig that changed the world.
What did you learn from that?
The biggest thing for me that at least stands out immediately is kind of like the importance of opportunity, or at least in taking at least just one step in that direction. Like, you mentioned, like, saving Doya wasn't the start of some masterful plan that we had conjured up beforehand.
Right.
But we chose in a moment of opportunity to do something of compassion, and that led to a chain reaction of paying that, of giving back to that, and kind of reflecting back on that level of compassion and opportunity. So, I mean, I guess the first thing, to answer your question, that kind of comes back to it is leaning into that compassion and choosing the opportunities to make the right or caring decision, has a tidal wave of benefit that it can bring afterwards, or at least has in our situation, has led to so many other chain reactions of goodness, and opportunities where we could do good. Not that just we got to say yes, but we had the opportunity to have an animal be freed because of the space that Doya had helped to create.
How did you decide to buy the place in Cedar Creek, and what was the impetus to do that?
So we chose to buy the place in Cedar Creek, our 5-acre property, and move from our half-acre, because throughout the process of rescuing Doya, the two goats, Bertha and Cookie, and then Doya and a couple of other residents that started to fill up that backyard, and we became a nonprofit. But when we became a nonprofit, our name was originally Fuller-Wigg Farms Animal Sanctuary, and that's kind of a reflection of who we were at the time. It was just the Fuller-Wiggs, us in our little half-acre backyard with friends and family visiting and caring for and, sponsoring some of the animals. And then we realized kind of how interested other people were on participating in this experience, wishing they could start a sanctuary themselves, or loving animals and wanting to have a way to be able to support an organization that's standing up for them. Or we just realized that there was so much more than what our own personal selves were being able to benefit by serving these animals, that there were other people that wanted a part of it. We wanted to create a place where that could be possible, as well as, of course, be able to increase the capacities on the number of residents we could save. We were pretty maxed out at 15 to 20 total animals at the half-acre location, and that includes, chickens and dogs and everybody. Mm-hmm. What could we do at something bigger, both for our community, to create a place where doing the compassionate thing and serving farm animals is a possibility, but also creating, of course, 5 acres more of capacity to start saving more lives.
How important is social media to your sanctuary, and how do you make the time to create posts for social media?
Social media is hugely important to the sanctuary. Our followers on Instagram and then Facebook are the inroads of, I'd say 95%, if not more, of our donations. And then, making the time is also important. I found myself, easier these days now that we have so many volunteers. There's other people to grab pics and videos and stuff to help me curate content. It was harder in the early days because every time something was happening, it was happening near you because you were scooping poop or filling water bowls or feeding and had gloves on or something. But now it's nicer there's so much more people caring for it that there's more time to actually have the phone out and capture the beautiful moments that happen across the sanctuary. But I try to, I guess, to answer your question on how do we keep up with the posts, try to have one go out each morning and then working with a lovely photographer that does a lot of work for us, Sarah Throop, and using the content that she or a teammate creates to be able to get something available. And then as we mature, we have a couple of volunteer members that have experience with marketing and marketing automation. So we're working to build a little bit more of a established monthly, quarterly calendar so it can be a living organism in and of itself as opposed to requiring my day-to-day involvement, ideally.
How do you get volunteers?
We solicit for volunteers through social media posts, things like that, sometimes, but 95% of our volunteers come from people who have emailed us and asked, how can I be involved? And that's also the reason when we moved to the 5 acres at first, because we were starting to get those at our half acre place and realizing that, people wanted to be a part of this with us. So people reach out, and we typically have an orientation once a month to onboard people to be able to join our feeding team, to join our chores team. For those that have, veterinary or vet tech experience, we have a medical team. So that all over the last 2 years, really with COVID, as that's created a little bit more space for me to be able to be home and people be reevaluating their priorities in their life and wanting to be outside, things have adjusted a lot in this environment in the last 2 years to really grow out our volunteer team.
How do you balance your work as a VP at Motiv and your sanctuary work?
It's been possible because of the volunteers. That would have not, the way that the sanctuary's grown, especially over the last 2 years, would not have happened without the volunteer support we've had, purely because of bandwidth capabilities of mine and capabilities that other volunteers have that I don't have. They allowed us to open up inroads and do more than we have. So at this point, it's really before 8 o'clock and after 5, my life revolves around the sanctuary with random check-ins kind of throughout the day. But then the day-to-day, when I'm, I'm in my office job, I'm able to focus on that role. And unless emergencies or something come up, can support mostly for kind of coordination throughout the day. Again, luckily, that would have not have been the case beforehand. But then after hours and on the weekends, I like to call it my hobby, is the sanctuary.
Let's change gears over to your personal story.
Sure.
How and when did you transition to a plant-based diet?
My transition to a plant-based diet was like a story arc that basically began with me moving to Austin in 2008 for college. And, as college kids often do, leaving their, suburbia hometown and stuff, just got a bit more exposed to the plight of farmed animals and the possibility of being vegetarian or pescatarian or vegan or any of those things were just now kind of entering my maturing brain. So it started then of cutting out various meats and starting along that process. As I learned more and became more exposed, but also became probably just more open to the idea of changing and being different and taking a leap of faith. Sounds like it's such a big commitment, but in the end, you're kind of like, oh, that could have been way easier if I knew what I knew now. And then throughout that time, as Angela and I started dating, we were both vegetarian. And then really, that transition between vegetarian and vegan was actually just understanding that the calves are taken away from their moms to make milk happen. And it wasn't this byproduct. Like it took us just reading one article or seeing some post and being like, did you see that? And like, yeah. I'm like, okay. And then the vegan transition happened very swiftly after we got that awareness.
How did you and Angela meet?
We met through volleyball. So as I mentioned earlier, I played for a year of volleyball in Spain. When I came back, Angela was playing sand volleyball and so was I, and we happened to be with different groups that met in South Padre Island to play a volleyball tournament. And we saw each other then a year later and actually started dating in 2016 after we saw each other again at that volleyball tournament, and the rest is history.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome how things come together like that. I tried the first time, it didn't work. We weren't in a position to be dating, but then 2016, I was like, all right, we'll see if this can happen again. And then by September of 2016, we were moving into our first home together.
It seems like a fast track. You guys must have known that you were right for each other.
Yeah, I think it was one of those, the situation, she had just moved from one job to another and was going to be renting a place that was south, and the home I was looking at buying was south. And it was just kind of like, hey, we're in a position where I think we both know what's going on here. We can, let's just go ahead and put this to the test. And I think it honestly was like the sanctuary question earlier, and choosing to rescue Doya and going to get that trailer. Like, some things in life, you just don't really feel any of the resistance. So you keep just going with it. And that was one of the experiences where there was no like questions or resistance. It was just, it was destiny fulfilling itself. So it just went.
You guys seem to be very well aligned. What does it mean to you to live aligned with your values?
Again, it's a great question and not something I've really reflected on ever. But the first thought is that it makes you more aware of your values. To live aligned to your values gives you greater understanding of what your values are. Like, so to choose, and growing up before I was vegan or whatever, things were more mindless or autopilot. And so kind of just more living with a flow versus any sort of selection onto the things that are done. So yeah, I guess living in our values, it's been awesome because it makes me more aware of what are the things that I'm valued, because I'm choosing to make decisions every day as opposed to going with some sort of standard flow. I'm opting in and opting out of various things. And in the world of, beginning and eating plant-based or veganism, like that, the lines of that continue to be evaluated and drawn in your understanding. So it makes you more open. And it has made me more open to evaluate my values are, so I can find other ways in which I can reinforce my stance in those values and how I live to reflect them.
When you changed to being vegan, did you struggle with anything as far as parents, friends, work?
No, I got really lucky that when I transitioned to veganism or being vegan, it was very easy from like a community and family standpoint, because I was an athlete. So like anybody that I played sports with and stuff, I got to be a vegan that was beating them in sports. So like they couldn't really say shit about, protein or any weird stuff like that. So that was kind of moot. And then my whole family is like progressive and open to those ideas. My sister was the one that when I first went to college, kind of pushed me the direction of thinking about vegetarianism and then, leading all this. So yeah. And then work. No, I mean, luckily it was all met with very little resistance in my spheres.
Was there anything holding you back from becoming vegan? Now, you mentioned that your sister kind of pushed you in that way. Was there anything that held you back?
I don't know if at the time, if it was consciously versus laziness isn't the right thing, but it's like a lack of critical investigation or a lack of kind of criticality and like evaluation of myself. I think a lot of people don't really do that until maybe you start to get to college or a little bit older. So I think that was the roadblock. Was I didn't love animals more, or, but I would walk through the West Mall at UT and people are trying to hand out pamphlets, the vegan and animal lovers, and you don't want to grab those pamphlets because they start to make you think something.
Right.
But I became more open to grabbing the pamphlets and looking at the pictures and like making sure I wasn't automated anymore in the way that I was going to be there. So I think that was probably the willingness to come to terms with, you've been a part of harm. You can do better. Yeah, so, and let's evaluate that and not have it be it wasn't an ego thing to see, could I evaluate myself and kind of show that, and learn that I've done wrong by participating in eating animals, and then just being okay with that being the reality of my past and choosing to make changes. And I think so many people, when I meet them, or they want to stand by how they have lived, because they want to be in defense of not having been bad. Not that they really disagree with like killing animals is wrong, but if killing animals is wrong and that's been a part of my, eating in the past, am I then wrong is something for somebody to come to terms with, something difficult for people to come to terms with sometimes.
Yeah, that gets back to the values question, right?
Yeah.
Obviously people think they're a good person, but when you actually have to look at the fact that you're contributing to this horror, you start to question yourself and your own values. And I think that causes people to have a very difficult time with vegans or literature from vegans in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it feels, by nature, you feel challenged, or people feel challenged when they hear that, because it is somebody, by saying somebody's vegan, most of the time they're sharing the way in which they view the world. And if you're not living in a way that is truly ethical, that it feels bad to know about people being more ethical, because, and it by nature feels a little bit like a challenge. And I don't say that from a high horse or anything, but like a perspective of, yeah, I get that you might feel a little offended because you're dealing with some internal things that are, loving animals, but not that way,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a tough thing to come to terms with, but, we all need to, and it's okay to get over that hump.
What is it about animals that makes you so passionate?
I mean, I think, animals, any life, is something that is of importance to me, but in kind of specifically animals, or even, looking more specifically at farmed animals, every animal that we rescue at like an individual level, but at a species level, is a lover. They want shelter, safety, security, love, community, family, like all of them in their nature want that. Sometimes roosters will attract you, yes, but it's because they want the love and care and shelter and support of their hens that they're protecting. Like, it all has a purpose. So the reason why I love animals, and specifically love farmed animals and have this compassion for them, is because such a genuinely innocent and kind and like soft and trusting species of animals have been the ones that humans sought out over generations to take advantage of. And it's the vulnerability in them that I see, that I love and want to protect, versus, what our ancestors saw. The vulnerability was an ability to take dominion over, as opposed to, care for the dominion of. And so, I don't know, that's when I laid with Doya and saw pigs for the first time, and just knowing him, that level of sentience and individuality, but also just innocence and trust, was really, really important and stood out to me. They are just like the dogs that I grew up with, and like that connected so much more just in knowing Doya, and again, has been extended onto countless other farmed animals that I know and love.
Where did you get the courage to take the leap to start Austin Farm Sanctuary?
I say it doesn't taking the leap to start Austin Farm Sanctuary, to me, it didn't feel courageous. It felt just natural. And like, you have to ask my wife the same question, because I'm much more, as the wind blows, my ship starts to move, and I don't really react to like, why is it, it's just like, oh, this is the direction. So it didn't feel courageous to kind of do that. We found out about 2 goats that were in need, and then 2 pigs, or a pig. And then it was kind of just like, oh yeah, we have space, we will help them. And it was much more simple, I guess, than that for me, and easy at first.
What is it like when you have to turn away animals?
Oof. Yeah, I mean, turning away, other than losing a resident that we have, losing them, having them pass, turning away animals is the hardest part of rescuing animals, because there's countless in need. We are not able to, from a capacity standpoint, both financially or team members or acreage, be able to support all of the animals that we're contacted about. So, I mean, it's hard. It's heart-wrenching. Every animal we get contacted about is, to us, just another sentient being that would love to be here and have this experience.
Right.
And so not being able to give them that, knowing what we quote unquote could provide if the situation worked out, is really tough. And it's been something that, honestly, over the last 5 years, like, that's probably the most draining part, isn't the loss of lives, because we know we've given them love in that time before they find loss. It's those that we can't help, whether because they're not opportunity isn't made up to us, or we're not able to take advantage of the opportunity for one reason or another.
What is one thing that's really exciting you right now in your life?
Now that we're moving to this new land, we're growing in a certain way. The last 5 years is the time that I've been with Angela, but we've also been starting the sanctuary, and we're buying land directly next to the sanctuary, but it's not on it. So it'll be very fun to live next door to the sanctuary, but also be able to begin, in a way, Angela and our kind of personal life, with the baby and being able to like just kind of have our own little space is something that, again, this has all felt so natural. We live in the middle of the 5-acre property. We lived in the middle of the 1-acre property. So being surrounded by the sanctuary is something I definitely desire. So it'll be very cool to be neighbors with the sanctuary. So when we're home and being able to just be humans together outside of the rescue space, that's something that later in this year when we move and we do inevitably have a baby, will be really fun to have a family Fuller-Wigg experience that is a little bit separated from Austin Farm Sanctuary, which I love, has been my life, but it'll be cool to be able to have an additional dynamic, be able to get some much needed light kind of shined upon it and get the focus that I want to give it.
Is there a cookbook or a book or possibly a documentary that you have given to someone who is transitioning to a plant-based diet?
As people are transitioning and asking for meals and stuff, I usually recommend the Rich Roll meal planner. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Yeah, that's usually what we go for. People are on the fence and trying to learn. I always go Game Changers. I'm like, just go watch this. It's what you need to know. Because again, a lot of the people I know are athletes or something that are thinking about that, and that just help push them that way. But yeah, if they're transitioning, they're looking for that information, I usually go the Rich Roll route just because I feel like the ease of use of their tool is something that people can kind of buy into.
Finally, can you give me one word to describe how you felt before you became vegan and one word to describe how you feel now that you are vegan?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the two that come up is the first, how I felt before I was vegan. And again, this is kind of reflecting on it now. I think my answer would be lost is the one word. And then how I feel now being vegan, I guess the word would be peaceful. To define peaceful, my life is rarely peaceful as far as running around and kind of up all over the place always. But it goes back to your question about having your actions align with your values. When you get to understand your values and embrace them further, the sense of peace that you know of, no matter kind of what you're doing or how many phone calls or emails or animals need to be fed or any of that, you still get to feel good knowing that you're putting your values and your best foot forward. And so that in and of itself, at least from a mindfulness standpoint, does bring peace in a place that I hadn't connected with or had awareness of before, hence the lost.
Such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for taking the time. What is the best way for people to follow you and support you on Instagram, the web, and social media in general?
Yeah, thank you for having us. Best way is follow us at Austin Farm Sanctuary on Instagram. You can find us on Facebook as well. We have a beautiful website one of our volunteers built for us. You can go to our sponsor, the residence area, and see every of the 100 residents there and learn their stories. So Instagram, Facebook, and our website are great ways to connect.
Thanks again, Chris, for being on Plant Your Seed.
Thank you. I look forward to hearing it.
Hope you are inspired by this story, and remember, it's never too late to plant your seed. Links to everything we talked about on the podcast can be found on Instagram at plant.yourseed in the show notes tab in the bio. If you enjoyed the show, remember to leave us a review, and until next time, thank you for listening.